Later, when people asked Sarah Jenkins how her life had changed, she never knew where to begin. Not with the wedding, not with the house, not even with the ring. She always began the same way: a stranger knelt down on a sidewalk for me. And I had to decide, in 30 seconds, whether the world was capable of something I had stopped believing it was. She was right to hesitate. She had very good reasons for hesitation. But she said yes €, or close enough to yes €, and that single decision unraveled everything that had come before it and wove it into something she had not thought she was allowed to want. This is that story. The morning had turned mean by 10 o'clock. A skin-tightening cold had rolled in off the Hudson overnight, the kind that ignored coats and found the throat, the wrists, the thin skin behind the ears. Manhattan streets had already filled with their usual morning fury €, the surge of briefcases and coffee cups, the squeal of delivery trucks reversing, the hollow percussion of boot heels on pavement €, and not one soul among the thousands who moved along West 44th Street paid any particular attention to the young woman standing near the corner of 8th Avenue with a baby pressed against her chest. Sarah Jenkins was 22 years old, though she looked both younger and older than that, at once €, younger in the softness of her features, the full curve of her mouth, the wide brown eyes that still held something uncalloused in their depths, older in the hollows beneath those eyes, the chapped lips, the careful economy with which she moved, as though every expenditure of energy had to be accounted for and justified against what remained in reserve. Her coat was a gray wool blend she had found at a donation bin on 38th Street 6 weeks ago, slightly too large in the shoulders, the left sleeve carrying a tear near the elbow that she had thought about mending several times without ever having anything to mend it with. Her hair was dark and straight and tied back with a hair elastic that had seen better days, and she had the posture of someone who has been standing for a long time and has made a quiet peace with the standing. Noah Jenkins was 3 months old. He was, even by the objective estimation of strangers who had no stake in the matter, a beautiful baby €, round-cheeked, with a feathering of dark hair and eyes that had settled into a pale, steady blue, the color of sky behind thin cloud. He was also very hungry, and had been crying, on and off, for more than 2 hours. Sarah had tried nursing him twice, but her milk had thinned from her own inadequate diet until it gave him half of what he needed and none of the satisfaction, and she had held him through both attempts with the taut, helpless composure of a person watching something important fail. She shifted him from her left shoulder to her right, pressing her lips to his forehead, murmuring the low, wordless sounds that had, in recent weeks, become her most fluent language. Her own stomach had stopped growling sometime around 8 in the morning and had since graduated to a tight, constant ache she had learned to ignore the way one learns to ignore a persistent background noise €, never fully, but functionally. She had eaten half a granola bar the previous afternoon, bought with coins she'd accumulated near the Port Authority bus terminal. Before that, a soup kitchen dinner 2 evenings ago €, a bowl of thick lentil soup, a bread roll, a cup of weak coffee €, eaten standing up because the chairs had all been taken. She had been working this block for 3 days. The method was simple and, she had discovered, largely ineffective. She stood where people could see her, she held Noah in a way that made his face visible, and she asked €, politely, always politely, because aggression or desperation only accelerated the shutters going down €, for help. Sometimes she carried a small square of cardboard on which she had written, in careful block letters, * mother with infant. Anything helps. God bless. * She hated the sign. It felt like a reduction of everything she was into a single plaintive sentence €, a compression of a whole complicated person into a symbol. But she had learned that without the sign, people's eyes slid over her even more completely than they already did. Most people did not stop. Of those who stopped, most shook their heads with expressions ranging from genuine sympathy to mild irritation before moving on. A few offered money €, a dollar here, a handful of change there. One woman had given her a whole sandwich, wrapped in wax paper, still warm from a nearby deli, and Sarah had eaten it in 4 rapid bites in a doorway, one hand still rocking Noah, the tears sliding silently down her face, not entirely attributable to hunger. She had learned not to take the rejections personally. That was the critical lesson, the one that separated the people who survived on the street from those who were destroyed by it. You could not feel each no as a verdict on your worth as a human being. You had to receive it like whether a euro impersonal, inevitable, passing. Rain didn't choose to fall on you. Neither did indifference. Still. By mid-morning on the third day, with Noah's crying wearing grooves into her concentration and her milk growing thin from poor nutrition, the no's were harder to absorb. Sarah was 3 years into the streets. She had arrived in New York from Albany at the age of 16, carrying a backpack with 2 changes of clothes and about $40 in cash. Her mother had remarried when Sarah was 13, and her stepfather a man named Gerald who moved through rooms with the slightly enlarged presence of someone who believes the world owes him more than it has delivered had made it clear in the daily texture of their domestic life that Sarah was a disruption he had not signed on for. He had not been physically violent. That, Sarah had sometimes thought, would have been easier to name and point to. Instead, he had been systematically unkind in the quiet, methodical way of someone who has concluded that a particular person is beneath the effort of cruelty and so defaults to something colder, dismissal. The raised eyebrow. The silences that lasted just long enough. The way he said her name when she entered a room where he was already present, as though the name itself were a minor inconvenience. She had managed until she was 16. Then she'd met a boy at a park on a summer night, and made the kind of mistake made by a girl who was starving for the experience of being someone's favorite person. She'd been pregnant before she found the courage to tell anyone, and when she finally told her mother, the sequence of events was swift and definitive. Gerald had said, without any particular heat, that he wouldn't run a house that accommodated this kind of thing. Her mother had not argued. And Sarah had understood, in that single awful moment, the precise and absolute dimensions of what she had and hadn't had all along. She'd packed her backpack that night. Left before dawn. Took the first bus to New York and sat in the back watching Albany disappear behind her, telling herself it was a beginning, not an ending, while knowing it was both. The first months in New York had been genuinely terrible in ways she rarely allowed herself to remember completely, because remembering completely made the ground feel less solid than it needed to be for daily functioning. Shelters and soup kitchens and the geography of survival. Then she met Jason. He was 20 and she was 16, and he was the first person in the city who had looked at her directly and spoken to her as though she were fully visible, not an obstacle or a problem, but a person. He had an easy laugh and the confidence of someone who had decided not to be frightened of things. And he had a sleeping arrangement and food and the capacity for a kind of protection. She hadn't known, for a long time, exactly what he did to support himself. She suspected something she didn't want to articulate because articulating it would require her to do something about it. By the time the picture was clear, she was 17 and pregnant and dependent, and leaving meant returning to nothing. He hadn't been cruel about it. He had been worse than cruel, he had been honest. He wasn't ready, he said. A baby was something he couldn't. And she'd heard him out and said, quietly, then help me figure out how I'll do it. And he had looked at her with the face of a 20-year-old who has just collided with the consequences of his own choices, and said he needed some time to think. He'd had until 7 in the morning. That was when she woke up and found the note. Found work in another city. Be well. She had read it 4 times. Then folded it carefully and put it in her coat pocket, and stood up and started walking, and had not stopped moving in a useful direction since. The shelter pregnancy had been difficult and the birth had been frightening, and the postpartum weeks had been the hardest of her entire life. But Noah had come out healthy, €8 pounds, 2 ounces, loud and emphatic, and apparently disinclined to accept any version of events in which his needs were not immediately met, which Sarah had taken as a very good sign about his character. 3 months in, she was still keeping the promise she had made him on the night he was born. Just barely. But keeping it. It was precisely at the moment when she had begun, quietly and without drama, to despair to feel the particular sinking sensation of someone who has temporarily run out of ideas that a man in a blue suit stopped directly in front of her. She had noticed him approaching from half a block away, the way she noticed everyone, with the automatic risk assessment instinct that 3 years on the street develops efficiently. Tall euro, perhaps 6'1" euro, with the kind of build that suggested a man who had once been athletic and had maintained the structure of it into middle age. The suit was impeccable euro deep navy wool, the jacket cut close to the shoulder, the trousers breaking precisely over polished Oxford shoes. His hair was dark, shot through at the temples with early gray, and he wore it brushed back from a face that was neither handsome nor plain but rather the kind that compelled attention through some quality of its expression euro an alertness, an interiority, as though whatever was happening behind those brown eyes was always slightly more complex than what was visible on the surface. He stopped. He looked at her. Not the way most men looked at her euro, the quick dismissive sweep, or the uncomfortable sidelong glance of someone who wants to feel sympathetic without committing to engagement euro, but with a directness that was neither predatory nor pitying. He looked at her the way a person looks at something they have been thinking about for some time and have finally decided to approach. Sarah prepared herself for the usual sequence, the apologetic expression, the pat of pockets, the sorry, I don't have anything on me, the departure. The man did none of those things. Instead, he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. He withdrew a small velvet box. And then euro right there, on the rush-hour sidewalk of West 44th Street, with 100 people streaming around them like water around 2 stones euro, he went down on one knee. The sound of the city did not stop. Of course it did not stop, the city never stops. But something in Sarah's immediate perception of it shifted, as though a volume knob had been turned down several notches. She was aware of people slowing, the formation of that spontaneous human ring that assembles wherever something unusual occurs, the raised phones, the murmur of curiosity. But she was more aware of the man's face, now level with Noah's, his brown eyes carrying an expression she had not seen in a very long time directed at her, sincerity. Absolute, unguarded, slightly desperate sincerity, without calculation or performance. If I adopt your son, he said, his voice calm and clear and pitched only for her, will you marry me? Sarah took 3 steps backward. Her heels caught the edge of the curb and she caught herself, tightening her arms around Noah, who had momentarily stopped crying in what seemed like shared astonishment. Her heart was hammering. Her hands had begun to tremble euro not from cold. Are you euro, she started, and had to stop to recalibrate her voice, which had come out somewhere between a whisper and a choke. Are you out of your mind? The man held his position on one knee, apparently unbothered by the concrete, apparently unbothered by the gathering audience, apparently unbothered by being called out of his mind by a woman whose coat had a tear in the sleeve. The velvet box remained open in his hand. The ring inside it caught the gray morning light euro simple, small, unmistakably genuine. My name is Marcus Sterling, he said. And I am being completely sincere. Around them, the circle of onlookers had thickened. She could see phones raised, recording. The familiar burn of humiliation crossed her cheeks, and she nearly turned and walked away. Euro would have turned and walked away, had it not been for something in the man's voice that stopped her. Not his words, exactly, but the quality underneath them, a rawness, carefully contained, the voice of someone who has rehearsed for composure and is mostly succeeding but not entirely. The voice of someone speaking the truth. Why, she managed. You don't know me. Marcus Sterling rose slowly from his knee, closing the velvet box and returning it to his jacket pocket with an unhurried deliberateness that spoke of a man who had all the time he needed and intended to use it carefully. Because I can never have children of my own, he said, his voice dropping, something heavy and old and quietly grieved moving behind it. And because when I see the 2 of you, I see the family I have spent years wanting. Noah resumed crying euro, a sudden escalation that broke through the ambient sound with the uncanny carrying power of infant distress. Sarah automatically began to rock him, and she watched Marcus Sterling's eyes follow the movement with an expression she recognized, longing. Not possessive euro, just the particular longing of someone watching something they have been told they cannot have. This isn't real, she said. It was an attempt to locate herself in a situation that had, in the last 90 seconds, evacuated the known world. It is completely real. He produced a business card. I've seen you here before. yesterday, and the day before that. I've been trying to find the courage to speak to you for 2 days. She didn't take the card. How do you know my name? He glanced at the piece of cardboard tucked under her arm. She had forgotten it was there. You're a mother who is doing everything she is capable of for her child, he said, without inflection, as a statement of observable fact. That is not something to be ashamed of. A man in work clothes at the edge of the small crowd stepped forward. Miss Euro, that's Marcus Sterling. Sterling and Sons Construction. My brother-in-law worked one of his sites for 3 years. Square man. Sarah looked at Marcus Sterling more carefully. The name meant something. Euro. She had seen it on building hoardings, on the sides of trucks. One of the largest construction firms in the tri-state area. If you're that wealthy, she said, why not find someone from your own world? Because women from my world want children of their own, he said, with the worn matter-of-factness of a man who has arrived at this conclusion many times and found it unchanged each time. When they find out about my condition, they move on. But you already have a son who needs a father, and I need a family. It is not a perfect situation. But it could be a true one. Noah was crying harder now, and Sarah's arms ached, and she had not eaten since the granola bar the previous afternoon. She was so tired, Euro, so profoundly, bone-deep tired, Euro, that this stranger before her with his honest eyes and small velvet box represented something almost too dangerous to look at directly, the possibility of rest. Of no longer carrying all of this alone. She was 22 years old, standing on a street corner with a hungry baby and 43 cents in her pocket. A man had knelt before her with a ring. She had been pragmatic for 6 years. She saw no reason to stop now. I'm not agreeing to anything, she said carefully. I'm not asking you to. Not today. He drew folded bills from his jacket. There's a restaurant across the street. The owner's name is Martha. Let me buy you lunch. You don't owe me anything for that. She stared at the money. More than she had collected in a week. It's not charity, he said, reading her hesitation with a precision that unnerved her. Consider it the cost of a future conversation. Sarah looked at Noah. Then at the money. Then at the man's face one more time. Euro. The steadiness of it, the absence of anything she recognized as performance. She thought about what it felt like to have nothing to lose. And then she thought about what it felt like to have Noah, and realized that was no longer true. She had something to lose. Which meant she had something to protect. And sometimes protection required courage. Just lunch, she said. Just lunch, he agreed. I'll be back tomorrow, same time. Whatever you decide, I'll accept. He turned and walked away through the crowd, which parted for him the way crowds part for people who carry certainty in their step. Sarah crossed the street toward the restaurant, Noah quiet against her chest, the impossible morning settling around her like weather she had not yet decided what to do about. But she was thinking about it. Already thinking about it hard. The restaurant was called Martha's Table, and it smelled of garlic and warm bread and the comfortable organized chaos of a place that feeds people seriously and without pretension. Martha herself, a woman of about 50 with gray-streaked hair pinned in a loose bun and an apron bearing the evidence of a productive morning, was waiting just inside the door as though she had been watching through the glass. You must be the young lady Dr. Marcus called about, Martha said, with the particular warmth of someone who considers feeding people a high calling. Come in. Let me get you out of the cold. Sarah settled at a table near the window. She accepted the glass of water and the small basket of bread and managed not to eat the entire basket in the first 3 minutes, which required more self-control than most things she had done that year. He called while he was still standing on the street, I think, Martha said, settling across from her with the easy authority of someone in her own domain. He's not impulsive, Dr. Marcus. Everything he does, he's thought about first. Why do you call him doctor? He's in construction. Started out in engineering. Doctorate from Columbia. His father always called him doctor and it stuck. Martha smiled. He's embarrassed by the title but too loyal to his father's memory to ask people to drop it. The food arrived €1, a generous plate of rice and beans and steak with caramelized onions and a side salad, a glass of juice, a small dish of sliced fruit she hadn't ordered. Sarah looked at it for a moment before she started eating, making herself see it clearly, the steam rising, the color of things properly cooked, the abundance of it. She had learned, in 3 years, not to take the sight of food for granted. She ate carefully, as Martha instructed, and while she ate, Martha talked €1, the comfortable monologue of a person who knows how to fill space without demanding it be filled back. He lost his wife 3 years ago, Martha said. Cancer. They'd been together since university. A brief pause. He changed when she died. Not the way that breaks people. He just €1 narrowed. Like a light turned down. Still on. Just smaller. Were they happy? Before she got sick. The kind of happy that makes you a little uncomfortable to watch. The kind where you can tell 2 people are genuinely each other's favorite person in every room. Martha looked out at the street. That kind of love becomes a kind of grief you carry forever. You don't get over it. You just get better at carrying it. And in 3 years, he hasn't €1 he's worked. Every hour God sends and some he hasn't. He's built buildings. Martha's voice held the rueful affection of someone who has watched a person take the wrong medicine for the right ailment. Today was the first time in 3 years I've seen him smile because he felt something real. Sarah finished the meal in a thoughtful silence that Martha, with the sensitivity of long practice, did not interrupt. The soup kitchen could feed a person's body. This €1, the quality of attention, the warmth, the simple normalcy of sitting at a table and being cared for €1, fed something else entirely. Something that had been running very low. She thanked Martha with a sincerity that the older woman received with a small, private smile and a kind of "you're welcome" that means, "I know exactly what this cost you to accept and I'm glad you let me." She walked back out into the cold Manhattan afternoon with something she had not possessed that morning, a question worth thinking about. She spent the afternoon walking, Noah asleep in the carrier, the thin winter sun tracking its low arc between the buildings. She moved without destination, which freed her mind from ordinary logistics and allowed it to run. What she kept returning to was not the money. Money was necessary, urgent €1, a relief she would not pretend otherwise €1, but money alone wouldn't have held her on that street corner. She had met men with money before, and understood their particular texture of confidence, the slightly bored largesse, the unexamined sense that everything had a price. Marcus had not felt like that. He had felt like someone in pain offering the most honest transaction he could construct. She thought about what he had said, "I cannot have children of my own, and I need a family." There was no disguise in that. No attempt to make it more romantic or less desperate than it was. Just the plain statement of a real human want. She had spent years surrounded by the plain statements of real human wants €1 on the street, in the shelters €1, and she had developed a reliable instinct for the difference between genuine need and performed need. Marcus Sterling's need was genuine. And so was hers. She stopped at a park bench and sat, Noah still sleeping, the city moving its indifferent afternoon around her, and she thought carefully about conditions. Because she was not a person who would simply accept. She was a person who had survived, and surviving required always understanding what was yours and what was owed and what could be taken if you didn't protect it. She would not trade one form of dependency for another. But she would, perhaps, accept a partnership. If the terms were right. By the time the early winter dark began to settle, she had 4 conditions fully formed and a 5th one forming. She went to the shelter on West 28th, lay in the narrow cot with Noah warm beside her, and turned each condition over in her mind like small solid objects €1, examining each from every angle, looking for weaknesses. Finding none. At 2 in the morning she finally slept, and she dreamed, for the first time in a long time, of a room with a south-facing window. She was at the corner 15 minutes early. The morning was fractionally warmer than the day before. Sarah had been to the drop-in center early enough to wash her face and put on the better of her 2 sweaters, and she stood on the corner with the composed alertness of a person who has made a decision and is ready to act on it. Marcus arrived precisely on time. He looked as though he, too, had not slept particularly well. Shadows beneath his eyes, the quality of having been awake thinking, which she recognized by kinship. He stopped in front of her at the same considered distance he'd maintained the day before. "You came back," he said. Relief was in it, unguarded, quickly followed by the correction of composure. But she'd caught the unguarded moment, and it told her something important. "I have conditions," she said. He blinked once. "Then, of course you do. Tell me." "First, I want my own bank account. In my name, with access I control independently. I will not be financially dependent on you in a way that makes leaving impossible. Even if I have no intention of leaving. The option needs to exist." "Agreed." "Second, I want to finish my education. I never completed high school. I want to do that, and then I want to study further. Whatever I turn out to be capable of, I want the chance to find out." "Agreed, completely and without reservation." Third. She adjusted Noah, a slight pause, letting this condition settle before she spoke it. "If this doesn't work, if you change your mind in 2 years or 5 years, or if I change mine, I want legal guarantees that Noah's adoption is permanent. No reversal. No withdrawal of support. Whatever happens between us as a married couple, he doesn't pay for it. He is not a bargaining chip." Marcus held her gaze. Something moved through his expression. Not discomfort at the condition itself, but something more complicated, the recognition of why the condition needed to be stated, and the gravity of what stating it implied about what she had learned to expect from people who were supposed to be permanent. "Not only do I agree," he said, "but I want you to know that by the time any lawyer writes those protections down, they will already be unnecessary. Noah is my son. That is not a conditional statement." She absorbed this. Fourth, I want to live separately for at least 6 months before we share a home. I need to know who you are before I live with you. I've made mistakes by assuming people were safe before I really knew them. I won't make that mistake again. I've already been thinking about this. I can buy a house close to mine, a safe neighborhood, properly furnished. We spend time together every day. We build something real. No pressure on the timeline. And fifth, she met his eyes. I'm not just a solution to your loneliness. And you're not just a solution to my poverty. I need this to be a real marriage, not one that exists only on paper for the adoption or only in function for the finances. If we're doing this, we're doing it with the intention of building something real between us. A pause. I know that can't be promised outright. Feelings don't work on a timeline. But the intention has to be genuine from the start. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. The morning moved around them, unhurried. I have been thinking about this for 2 days, he said, and what I keep coming back to is that I am not a person who makes impulsive decisions. I am not doing this on a whim or out of grief or because I saw a beautiful girl and had a moment of delusion. He met her eyes with absolute steadiness. I am doing this because when I saw the two of you, I saw something I have wanted for a very long time, and I saw an opportunity to be honest about wanting it instead of pretending I don't. The intention is as real as anything I've ever intended. Sarah looked down at Noah, who was awake now, his blue eyes moving between the two adults with the alert, comprehensive attention of someone whose entire understanding of the world is being assembled from these observations. She thought of all the cold nights. All the missed meals. All the times she had lain awake in a shelter cot rehearsing contingencies, calculating what would happen if Noah got sick and she had nothing, if the weather turned genuinely dangerous, if she ran completely dry of places to ask. She looked up at Marcus Sterling. I accept, she said. He closed his eyes for a single beat, something crossing his face that was close to prayer. When he opened them, there were tears, quiet and unashamed, that he made no move to hide or explain. Thank you, he said simply. He reached into his pocket and produced the velvet box. In the morning light, the ring was exactly what it had appeared the previous day: simple, genuine, unstudied. A small round diamond in a plain gold band, €1, the kind of ring a man buys when he is thinking about meaning rather than display. "It's not expensive," he said, sliding it onto her finger with a care that seemed disproportionate to the small act. "But it's real. Like I hope this will be." Sarah looked at the ring on her hand. The passing crowd paid them no particular attention this time. The intimacy of that ordinariness moved her more than the theater of the previous morning. "One day at a time," she said. "One day at a time," he agreed. The practical machinery of the arrangement moved quickly once Marcus Sterling applied himself to it, and he applied himself with the focused energy of a man who, having made a decision after long internal deliberation, has no further use for ambivalence and wants only to act. First, documentation. Sarah's papers were in disorder, some lost to the careless metabolism of street life, others simply never properly obtained. Her birth certificate had been in her backpack the night she left Albany. The backpack had been stolen 6 months later in a park, and replacing a birth certificate without a fixed address was the kind of administrative problem that compounds itself until the whole edifice of official identity threatens to collapse into something unprovable. Marcus accompanied her through every government office and administrative counter without impatience. He paid fees without comment, asked the right questions with the competent ease of a person accustomed to institutional bureaucracy, waited in the long fluorescent-lit queues of civic life with the same equanimity he brought to everything. She noticed that he did not perform patience, he did not sigh and suppress it, did not check his phone every few minutes. He simply waited, as though the waiting were no different from any other use of his time. As though her time and his occupied the same value. "You're not what I expected," she said on the third such afternoon, waiting for a clerk to locate the right form. "What did you expect? Someone who treats delays as personal insults. Rich men usually behave as if the world owes them velocity. My father spent 30 years building this company from a single truck and a loan he could barely afford," Marcus said, without particular sentiment, just as a fact, the way you cite a source. He always said the people who think their time is more valuable than other people's are usually wrong about what's valuable. A pause. "I miss him." "How long has he been gone?" 6 years. "About a year before I met Diane." He said the name carefully, like a word in a language he was still learning to pronounce correctly. "Sometimes I think about conversations I would have with him now. He would have liked you. You don't know that. He liked people with fight in them. He said the world was full of people who folded when things got difficult, and the ones who didn't were worth knowing." He looked at her. "You haven't folded." The clerk called their number and Sarah gathered her papers and went to the counter, carrying those words with her like something tucked in a pocket. The house was on a quiet street in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, a 2-story brownstone row house with a small walled garden at the back and window boxes holding the skeletal remains of a previous tenant's herb garden. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a window over the garden, a living room with tall ceilings and afternoon light that had not yet, in this February, found its full strength. Sarah walked through it in silence, running her hand along the wall of the upstairs corridor, the plaster smooth and cool under her palm. She stopped at the threshold of the smaller bedroom, a south-facing, with a window that caught whatever light was available and held it longer than physics seemed to justify. "This one," she said. "For Noah. However you want it arranged. I've never had a room with morning sun." She said it almost to herself, registering the fact as something that needed to be noted and remembered. Marcus did not offer a compensatory statement. He just said, quietly, it'll be his before the week is out. They chose everything together, furniture, colors, curtains, the small rug with illustrated animals that Sarah picked from a catalog with an unself-conscious delight that Marcus found himself cataloging, adding to the growing private inventory of things about her that moved him. She had strong opinions, expressed without apology once she had established they were genuinely wanted. She liked warm colors, deep yellows and terracottas, and a particular shade of teal she pointed to in a paint sample book and said, without context or explanation, That one, definitely, with the certainty of someone who has been carrying that preference for a long time and is glad to finally have somewhere to put it. She also had the habit, he noticed, of looking at things she liked for slightly longer than necessary, the way a person who has learned not to take nice things for granted will pause to register them properly, building the small reserves of beauty that get depleted by hard living. He caught her doing it with a ceramic mug he handed her one afternoon. She looked at it, turned it in her hands, set it on the counter with a care fractionally more deliberate than the mug required, as though she were placing it in her memory as well as on the surface. He did not comment on this. He simply started buying mugs he thought she'd like. The crib assembly happened on a Thursday afternoon. Marcus on the floor with the hardware spread around him and the instruction diagram held at arm's length, Sarah holding components steady and passing the right Allen key when required, Noah in his carrier on her chest observing the proceedings with the solemn attention of someone taking notes. They talked while they worked about nothing consequential. The instruction diagram's apparent belief that furniture could be assembled by someone with 3 hands, whether Noah would be walking by summer, whether the back garden would be salvageable if they cleared it while there was still frost in the soil. The conversation had the quality of something settling into its own rhythm. They were not performing it for each other. It was just 2 people in a room together, talking about what was in front of them, which was both the most ordinary thing in the world and, for both of them at this particular point in their lives, something close to extraordinary. When the crib was finished and Marcus shook it with a thoroughness that made Sarah laugh out loud for the first time, a genuine unguarded laugh that surprised both of them equally. He looked at her with equal parts pleased and startled, as though the sound of it had landed somewhere he hadn't expected. "Your prince has a castle worthy of him," he said, with a self-consciousness that appeared only in the slight elevation of his voice on the word prince, as though he wasn't quite sure yet how much affection he was allowed to express out loud. That night, after Marcus went back to his apartment, Sarah put Noah down in the new crib and sat on the floor of his room in the dark for a long time, listening to him breathe. For the first time in 3 years, the night felt like it was on her side. Patricia Sterling Brooks came to find her the day after the house was first arranged, which told Sarah several things: that Patricia had been watching, that she had access to information about Marcus's movements, and that she operated on the assumption that direct engagement was preferable to indirect influence. She was elegant and efficient and slightly cool in the way of a woman who has been managing her emotions for so long that efficiency has become the emotional register itself. She had her brother's brown eyes and the same quality of assessing attention, but where Marcus's attention felt like genuine curiosity, Patricia's felt, at least at first, like audit. They sat in a coffee shop, warm, sophisticated, and Patricia stirred her coffee with precise circular movements and said, "I'm going to be direct." "Please do." "My brother is a grieving man who has been alone for 3 years and who made an impulsive emotional decision when he saw you. He's a good man, I want to be clear about that, but he isn't thinking clearly, and this is the most dramatic expression of that I've seen. You think he's having a grief episode. I think he's a lonely person who saw a young woman with a beautiful baby and had a moment of romantic impulse and is now too proud to pull back from it." "Those things could all be true," Sarah said evenly, "and the proposal could still be genuine." Patricia paused, recalibrating. She had not, Sarah suspected, expected resistance of this particular quality. She had expected uncertainty, deference, the reflexive accommodatingness of someone who has spent years being grateful for whatever scraps of acknowledgement came her way. "Don't you think Noah deserves better than an arrangement built on a stranger's impulse?" Patricia asked, shifting angles. Sarah felt something sharpen in her. "What do you think I've been trying to provide him with, since before he was born? What do you think the last 3 months on the street were, if not everything I had available toward giving him what he deserves?" She kept her voice level. "I know what I'm doing, Mrs. Brooks. I know the risks. And whatever concerns you have about your brother's judgment, take them to your brother. This decision belongs to us." She stood. "I understand your concern for him. I even appreciate it, genuinely. But I won't be cross-examined like a suspect for accepting a proposal made freely by an adult man." She left, and walked back to Carroll Gardens with Patricia's words cycling in her mind, not because they had shaken her, but because she was honest enough to acknowledge the grain of truth at the center of even the most imperfectly aimed concern. She and Marcus had known each other for less than a week. But fast, she thought, was not the same as wrong. The world moved at its own speed. Sometimes you moved with it or you moved alone. She had moved alone long enough. The investigator Patricia hired reported back within 8 days. Sarah knew from the quality of Marcus's silence that Thursday morning something closed and effortful, the careful management of a man carrying information he has not yet decided how to hold that something had shifted. I need to ask you some things, he said. I've been completely honest with you. Your age? You told me 20. Patricia says 22. The heat in her face was immediate. Yes. Why the lie? Because 20 seemed more she stopped. Started again. I was afraid that at 22 you might think I should be managing on my own. That 22 was old enough not to need help. He held her gaze. Your reason for leaving home. You said your stepfather drove you out. But you were also pregnant when you left. Both things are true. I was 16. When my mother and stepfather found out I was pregnant, my stepfather said he wouldn't have a problem like that under his roof. They kicked me out together. The pregnancy was the occasion. His cruelty had been waiting for an occasion. Jason. He has a criminal record. Drug trafficking. I found out after I was already involved with him. I was 17 and living on the streets, and he had food and a safe place to sleep, and he was kind to me at first, and I didn't know. And then when I knew, I was already pregnant and already dependent, and leaving meant returning to nothing. She held his gaze. I made choices that a person who grew up safe and warm and with options would not have made. I know that. But I made the best choices available to me with what I had. The other men Patricia mentioned. Wealthy men you approached before me. Sarah took a slow breath. When Noah was a month old, he got sick. Ear infection, high fever. I was terrified and had nothing to treat him with, and I approached 2 men who seemed like they could help. One of them filed a police complaint because I wouldn't accept his first refusal. The other paid me $50 to go away. I used it for medicine. Why not tell me? Because I was ashamed. Because I thought you'd see someone calculating and miss everything else. A pause. Was I wrong to be afraid of that? The silence before his answer was long enough to be honest. No, he said. You weren't wrong. I let Patricia plant doubts in my head that I should have brought directly to you instead of sitting with alone. He met her eyes. I'm sorry. Don't do it again. I won't. She looked at him steadily. She also implied that Noah might not be mine. Marcus looked away briefly the first time she had seen him unable to hold her gaze. She mentioned no medical records of the birth. Because he was born at a homeless shelter. Not a private hospital. The shelter is called St. Jude's Hope Center, and the woman who runs it has kept a ledger of every birth on those premises since the day she opened the doors. I will take you there right now, and you can read the entry in her handwriting and speak to the women who were in the room when Noah was born, and then you can apologize to me properly. A pause. Or you can simply trust me, and we can move forward. Take me to the shelter, Marcus said. Not because I doubt you. Because you're right that I allowed the doubt to exist in my head, and I need to clear it properly, for both our sakes. St. Jude's Hope Center was a converted brownstone in Bedford-Stuyvesant, tidy and plain, with a hand-painted sign above the door and a small front garden where a weather-worn saint kept patient vigil. Mrs. Dorothy opened the door with the air of someone for whom nothing is entirely surprising and everything is potentially manageable. She held her arms out to Sarah immediately, and Sarah walked into them and stayed there for a moment with Noah pressed warmly between them, and Marcus stood on the doorstep and watched with an expression he couldn't govern and didn't try to. The ledger entry was in Mrs. Dorothy's careful handwriting: date, time, weight, length, mother's name. In the margin, in a slightly different pen, as though added as an afterthought that was actually not an afterthought at all, *, mother and child doing well. Strong boy. Strong girl too. Marcus looked at it for a long time. I'll call the women who were present that night, Mrs. Dorothy offered. They'd remember. That's not necessary, Marcus said. He looked at Sarah. I'm sorry. The doubt was mine, not warranted by you. I know, she said. Before they left, Marcus wrote a substantial check for the center's operations fund. Mrs. Dorothy went very still, then quietly said God bless you, which he received with the slight discomfort of a man who does not consider generosity a notable achievement but has too much respect for the giver of the blessing to deflect it. Leaving the shelter, they walked for a while without speaking through the February streets of Brooklyn, the cold air carrying the faint smell of a bakery on the next block. The silence between them was different from the silences that had preceded it. Lighter, cleared. My father used to say, Marcus said finally, that the test of trust isn't how you behave when there's no reason not to trust someone. It's how you behave when someone gives you a reason. And I behaved badly. I'm telling you so you know that I know it. A pause. And I'm going to speak to Patricia. This stops. Sarah considered this. Don't be cruel to her. He looked at her, surprised. She loves you, Sarah said simply. That's not nothing. Just make it clear where the line is. He nodded. They walked on. He was sitting on the front steps of the Carroll Gardens house when they returned from Brooklyn that evening, and the sight of him landed in Sarah's stomach like a stone in still water. The specific weight of something you thought you'd left behind, making itself present again. Jason Jenkins had been, at 20, the kind of person who could be mistaken for something better than he was. He had physical confidence, an easy bearing, a good-looking face that read as promise in youth. He was 23 now, cleaner than she'd expected. Decent clothes, tidied up for an occasion. But she could still see, around the eyes, what he was, the calculation, the wariness, the reflexive assessing of situations in terms of advantage. Sarah, he said pleasantly, as though they had parted on excellent terms. What do you want, Jason? To meet the man. He looked at Marcus with open, uncomplicated curiosity that had no politeness in it. Jason Jenkins. Noah's father. I doubt it, Marcus said. The legal situation was exactly as complicated as Sarah had feared. Jason's name was on the birth certificate. She had put it there in the last hopeful weeks of pregnancy, telling herself that fatherhood might reach him in ways nothing else had. It had been an expensive hope. What followed were several days of escalating threat, the initial demand for $100,000, then a reappearance with the demand doubled and a story about criminal debts. Partially true and largely exaggerated. The attempted break-in at Carroll Gardens. The midnight visit to Marcus's apartment with the shadowy creditor called Spike invoked like a conjuration. Sarah moved through all of it with a steadiness that came not from theatrical courage but from something deeper, the knowledge that she had already survived the worst available version of things, and that everything since then was navigable. She had been afraid of many things in her life. She was not, she discovered, afraid of Jason anymore. She had been afraid of him once. In the specific bodily way of someone who has no power in a situation. But she was not that person. She had conditions now. She had a lawyer. She had a man standing beside her who had not stepped back once from the moment the word family became real. You know what I keep thinking about, she said to Marcus on the third night, sitting in his apartment at 2 a.m. while security watched the lobby below. What? That if Jason hadn't come back. If this had all been clean and uncomplicated. We wouldn't know each other the way we know each other now. What do you mean? I mean that we've seen each other under pressure. Most couples spend months, sometimes years, before they understand how the other person behaves when things get genuinely hard. She looked at him steadily. I know you don't abandon people when things get frightening. I know you keep your word. I know that when you say my family, you mean it all the way through. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I know you're brave in the real way, he said. Not the careless kind. The kind that thinks about all the consequences and acts anyway because the alternative is worse. He paused. I know that Noah is lucky. She looked at him across the sofa in the particular honesty of 2 in the morning, which strips away everything formulaic and leaves only what's real. Marcus, she said, why haven't you kissed me yet? He blinked. Then, unexpectedly, laughed a genuine, unguarded laugh, surprised out of him. Because, he said, when he'd recovered, I wanted to be sure you weren't doing it from gratitude or obligation. And now? He studied her face in the dim city light from the tall windows, the shadow and plane of her features, the steadiness of her eyes, the person she was, clearly, without any pretense remaining between them. Now I think it would be because you want to. It would, she confirmed. He leaned toward her, slowly, giving her every opportunity to reconsider, and when their lips finally met it felt less like a beginning than a recognition. Two people arriving somewhere they had both been moving toward for some time without naming the direction. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. I was afraid, she admitted, that the arrangement would be all there was. That I'd be grateful and you'd be fulfilled and that would be the entire story. I think, Marcus said quietly, that the entire story is considerably longer than that. The meeting Mr. Harrison arranged revealed that Jason's debt to Spike was real but not at the catastrophic scale Jason had presented. The $50,000 owed was genuine, the $200,000, the imminent violence, the armies of dangerous men exaggerated for leverage. Sarah had suspected as much. She had lived with Jason long enough to understand how he used fear as a negotiating tool, always escalating stakes until the path of least resistance was to give him what he wanted. Armed with this information, they arranged the meeting at a mall food court on a Tuesday afternoon. Public, neutral, Marcus's private security discreetly positioned, Mr. Harrison present as witness and legal counsel. The man who walked in looked like Jason reorganized. Still recognizably the same face and frame, but something essential rearranged. A deliberateness in his walk, a quietness she hadn't seen before, a folder held in his hands with the care of something that had cost him effort. Not money. Something harder to come by. He laid the documents on the table one by one, a work contract with a construction company in rural Pennsylvania, starting in 2 weeks, a debt repayment agreement with structured terms, a letter of reference from someone who had employed him for 3 months and found him reliable. Mr. Harrison examined each document with professional skepticism. After 4 minutes, he gave Marcus a small, single nod. I want to give up all legal rights to Noah, Jason said. Today, here, with a lawyer present. Sarah looked at him for a long time. Not as a test. Just trying to read what was true. Why, she said. He looked at his hands on the table for a moment. Because I know what a father is supposed to be. I've always known it. And I've spent 3 years learning the distance between knowing and doing. He glanced at Marcus, briefly, with something that was not quite respect and not quite resentment but the complicated middle space between them. Noah has what he's supposed to have. A mother who would do anything for him. A man who went down on one knee on a public sidewalk and meant it. A pause. I can't compete with that. I shouldn't try. The threats, Marcus said evenly. Exaggerated. I'm sorry. He looked at Sarah. I used fear to try to get more money, and I know what that makes me. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. A pause. I'm sorry. For all of it. Not because I need anything from you. Just because it's true and I've never said it out loud. Sarah looked at Marcus. He returned her look and waited, giving her whatever she needed. Sign the papers, she said. Jason signed each one without hesitation. When it was done, he stood. He reached into his folder one final time and placed a single object on the table, a photograph, slightly creased, taken without Sarah's knowledge. Her, sitting in a park, Noah in her arms, looking down at him with an expression of such complete unself-conscious love that she barely recognized herself. Keep it, Jason said. He should know he was loved before he was even born. By both of us. He left without looking back. Sarah sat with the photograph in her hand for a moment. Then she put it carefully in her coat pocket, close to her chest, where she would carry it for a long time. The court investigator assigned to assess the marriage's legitimacy was a woman named Linda Marsh, middle-aged and professionally pleasant, who arrived at the apartment on a Friday afternoon with a notepad and the attentive neutrality that is either genuine warmth or its precise simulation. Sarah couldn't quite tell which, and suspected that was the point. She asked questions for over an hour. How they had met. The terms of their arrangement. Their day-to-day life together. Who cooked, who cleaned, who got up with Noah in the night. Their plans for the future. Marcus's medical history. Whether Sarah had ever been in any legally compromising situation. Marcus and Sarah had agreed beforehand to be entirely natural. No rehearsed answers, no coordinated narratives. Just the truth, with all its rough edges. Mr. Sterling, Ms. Marsh said, why adopt rather than exploring other medical options for biological children? Because Noah exists, Marcus said simply. He's already here, and he needs a father. I didn't see the point in pursuing other paths when the path I wanted was right in front of me. Mrs. Jenkins soon Sterling are you ever concerned that Mr. Sterling's feelings might change over time? Sarah thought about the question honestly. I'm concerned the way any person is concerned about the future in a new relationship. But I've seen how Marcus behaves when things get genuinely hard. I've seen him choose us, repeatedly, under real pressure. That's a more reliable indicator than anything he could promise in a calm moment. Ms. Marsh made a note. She looked at Noah, who was on the floor making systematic progress toward a wooden block that was just out of reach, narrating the effort with soft insistent sounds. She watched him achieve the block with the concentration of someone observing something of genuine interest. He seems very settled, she said. He is, Sarah said. Do you plan to have other children? Marcus and Sarah looked at each other across the room. A quick glance, private, carrying a conversation in shorthand that Ms. Marsh observed and noted without appearing to. We would like to, Sarah said. When the time is right. Through adoption or otherwise. Either, Marcus said. I'm exploring options for reversing my sterilization. It's a possible procedure, though complex. The most important thing is that Noah has siblings. The method is secondary. Ms. Marsh closed her notepad. Thank you for your time. I'll be in touch within the week. When she left, Marcus and Sarah sat for a moment in the particular silence of people who have been watched and are relieved to no longer be. How do you think it went? Sarah asked. I think, Marcus said, that we were ourselves, and that was the right thing to be. She nodded. She picked up Noah's wooden block and set it just slightly further away, watching him regard this development with focused irritation before beginning to process again. He's determined, Marcus said. He gets it from his mother, Sarah said. Marcus smiled. Not the careful managed smile of someone conscious of being observed, but the real one, the one that started somewhere behind his eyes and worked its way forward. The one that Martha had noticed 3 weeks ago and filed away as the most significant thing she'd seen in 3 years. The wedding was small because both of them wanted it small. A gathering, not a production. The ceremony itself formal enough to mean something without being so elaborate. It became a performance rather than the thing itself. Martha came in a dress the color of a good burgundy and cried at all the appropriate moments and was magnificently unapologetic about it. Mrs. Dorothy came and brought Amber, who brought her own baby, born 2 months after Noah, and the two babies observed each other across the aisle with the solemn diplomatic gravity of senior officials at a first summit. Mr. Harrison came, looking, for once, like a human being rather than a legal instrument. 3 colleagues of Marcus's whose opinions he genuinely respected. 2 women from the shelter on West 28th who had been quietly kind to Sarah in small consistent ways she had not forgotten. Patricia came. She sat in the second row in a gray wool dress with a thin gold necklace and her hands folded in her lap, her expression calibrated to a neutrality that was either the absence of feeling or its very careful management. She had spent the previous 3 weeks in a state of suspended judgment. She had stopped the investigator, stopped any further attempts at interference. Whether this represented a change of heart or a strategic withdrawal, Sarah had not been able to tell from a distance. She found out at the reception. Patricia found Sarah by the tall windows that looked out over the garden of the small restaurant Marcus had reserved, a Euro run by a man who had worked for Marcus's father 20 years ago and who had accepted the commission with the quiet honor of someone given the chance to repay a debt. "You were right," Patricia said, without preamble or apology, which was, Sarah had come to understand, Patricia's version of both. "He is the person he was before Diane died. Or close to it. I hadn't seen that version of him in 3 years." "He did that himself," Sarah said. "I just arrived at the right moment." "You arrived and you stayed. That's not the same as just arriving." Patricia looked out the window to where Marcus was standing with Noah against his shoulder, the baby drowsing in the total relaxation of someone who has established complete trust. "My brother is not someone who trusts easily. When he trusts, it's real. And he trusts you." "I know. And I trust him." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "I want to apologize for the investigator. You were protecting him. I was frightening you and undermining something real because I was afraid." A pause. "I'm better than that. Or I should be." "You're his sister," Sarah said. "That's not a small thing. Keep being his sister. Just let him be my husband." Patricia looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression, a Euro, the careful neutrality giving way briefly to something more unguarded, more genuinely moved. "He's lucky," she said. "We both are," Sarah said. They stood together by the window, watching the same man. The house in Carroll Gardens became, over the months that followed, what houses become when the right people fill them, not a structure but a place. A specific location in the world that has absorbed enough warmth and repetition and daily life to hold its shape even when its occupants are away from it. Sarah started her GED courses in February, 3 days a week at a community college, 15 minutes by subway, Noah in daycare those mornings, her textbooks spread across the kitchen table in the evenings. It turned out she was genuinely good at school, a Euro, not merely adequate but actually good, in a way that surprised her teachers and not, she suspected, entirely Marcus, who had a way of looking at her when she was working that carried in it some private assessment he had made early and was now watching be confirmed. She was good at mathematics. She was excellent at writing. She loved history with the passion of someone who has spent years in precarious circumstances and finds, in the record of how people have survived and adapted across centuries, something deeply personally relevant. She studied some nights until well past midnight, after Noah was in bed and Marcus had gone to his side of the apartment, in the kitchen with the lamp on and the city quiet outside, feeling the particular satisfaction of building something, a Euro, slow, incremental, brick by brick, a Euro, that no one could take. Marcus made it a point to be home by 7 on her study nights, taking over Noah's bedtime routine with the ease of someone for whom the ritual has become as natural as breathing. He had learned to change diapers and give bottles and rock Noah to sleep with an unself-conscious competence that still, months in, occasionally made Sarah stop what she was doing and watch for a moment, a Euro, this large, serious man sitting in the small chair in the animal wallpapered room, whispering some improvised and probably very bad story to a drowsing baby, with the careful attentiveness of someone doing the most important work he has ever been assigned. "I want to teach," she told him one Sunday in March, sitting in the garden while Noah slept and the first green was beginning to appear in the beds they had cleared together in February. "Primary school. 5 and 6-year-olds. The ones who've just arrived and everything is still enormous and completely possible." "Then that's what you'll do. It's years away. You've got time." He handed her a cup of coffee, a Euro, a ceramic one with a pattern of leaves. "You're 22 years old. You have more time than you think." She looked at her hands around the warm cup, at the ring on her left hand, at the garden with its early spring green. She thought about the first morning, a Euro, the sidewalk, the cold, the hungry baby and the empty stomach and the honest-eyed stranger on one knee in the February cold. She thought about all the distance between that morning and this one, a Euro, not just the distance of months, but the vertical distance, the ascent from one version of a life to another. "Marcus," she said. "Yes. Thank you for kneeling on the pavement. He looked at her with the expression she had come to know best, a euro, the one that was present when he was trying to contain something and not entirely succeeding, the warmth that breached the careful surface of him when his guard was down. It was cold, he said. I know. That's what made it convincing. He reached over and took her hand, a euro, still wearing the ring, the small diamond catching the March light, a euro, and held it in his without saying anything further, and they sat together in the garden while the city moved its Sunday slow way through the afternoon, and Noah slept above them in the room with the south-facing window, and the new herb garden put out its first tentative green, and the day was ordinary and warm and entirely, completely theirs. The adoption hearing was on a Thursday in late April, and it lasted 45 minutes. Judge Patricia Osei was a woman of about 50 with reading glasses on a beaded chain and the quiet, unhurried authority of someone who has spent decades in a room where the stakes are genuinely high. She read through the file with thorough, careful attention. She asked questions, a euro, direct and thoughtful, the kind that require the real answer rather than the prepared one. She looked at Noah, who was sitting on Sarah's lap wearing the small blue jacket Marcus had bought for the occasion, examining a toy duck with the focused attention of someone engaged in important research. She looked at Marcus, whose hand rested on the back of Sarah's chair in the unconscious protective posture of someone for whom proximity to these two people has become his most reliable definition of safety. She looked at Sarah, who sat straight-backed and met the judge's eyes with the directness of someone who has nothing to hide and has done the work to be able to say so. Judge Osei stamped the order. She handed it to Mr. Harrison. And then, departing from the formal proceeding in a way that suggested she did not consider this a departure but simply the appropriate final note, she leaned forward slightly and looked at the three of them, a euro, the tall man with gray at his temples, the young woman with the brown eyes and the composed, hard-won steadiness, the small serious boy with his mother's coloring and his own particular gravity, a euro, and said, "You're a family." It was not a legal finding. It was simply true. Outside the courthouse, on the wide stone steps in the late April light, a euro, the real light now, the light that has remembered what warmth is and means to use it, a euro, Marcus held Noah in one arm and Sarah with the other, and she let herself be held in the full, uncomplicated way that she had not permitted herself since she was very young, before she learned that depending on someone was a vulnerability. She let herself be held. Noah reached up and grabbed a handful of Marcus's collar with the definitive grip of a person staking a claim, and Marcus looked down at him with an expression that was so purely and simply love that it required no interpretation. Somewhere in the city a truck was reversing. A telephone was ringing. 100 ordinary things were happening in their ordinary way, indifferent to the particular significance of this moment on these particular steps. And none of them touched what was contained in it, a euro, the quality of something earned. Not given, not bought, not performed, but built, slowly and imperfectly and with complete sincerity, from the materials available, two people's honesty, one small boy's trust, and whatever it is that sometimes works out between people when they are both willing to say exactly what they need. "What now?" Sarah asked. Marcus considered the question with the care he brought to everything that mattered. "Now," he said, "we go home." They went home. The house in Carroll Gardens was waiting for them, a euro, south-facing window catching the April afternoon, the garden beginning to bloom, the kitchen still carrying the faint smell of coffee Marcus had left on before they went out, the small ordinary evidence of a life that expected to be returned to. Sarah stood in the hallway for a moment after they came in, Noah on her hip, Marcus beside her, and looked at all of it, a euro, the books on the shelves, the mugs on the counter, the wooden blocks on the living room rug, the small framed photograph that Martha had taken of the three of them at the reception, unposed and mid-laugh, all three of them caught in the same unreserved moment of happiness. She looked at all of it, and she registered it properly, a euro, thoroughly, with the full attention of someone who knows the difference between having something and taking it for granted. She registered the warm light and the smell of their home and the weight of the baby on her hip and the hand of the man beside her finding hers without looking, the way a hand finds something it already knows by heart. Then she set Noah down on the rug with his wooden blocks and went to make fresh coffee, and Marcus followed her into the kitchen and stood beside her at the counter, and they talked about nothing in particular, a euro, about whether the garden needed rain, about whether Noah was close to walking, About the textbook chapter she wanted to discuss euro, and the afternoon light came through the kitchen window and lay across their hands and across the room that had become, without fanfare or formal ceremony, the steady, particular, irreplaceable center of their shared life. Outside, the city went on. Inside, there was this. And this, she thought, setting the two mugs side by side on the counter and watching the steam rise from both of them at once, was more than enough. It was everything.